So one of the major concepts that students learn in fifth grade is that standard algorithm or that regular method of multiplying larger numbers. Last year in fourth grade, they would have seen 42 times 34. They would have been using the area model, and some of them called it the box method. Same thing. And today we're going to see how that links to the standard algorithm. And again, that ultimate goal is that students are doing that standard algorithm or that regular way for the lifetime skill. So let's backtrack and see if they were doing this problem 42 times 34 in that area model. So they would have broken up the 42 into a 40 and a 2, the 34 into a 30 and a 4. And we know 4 times 3 is 12. And then we add those extra zeros in there. And I'm just kind of breezing through the multiplication part because that is something that they have had for a few years now, so that should be something that's a little more concrete. 30 times 2 is 60. 40 times 4, 160. 4 times 2 is 8. Now from this point here, we would add all those numbers together. Let's keep it organized so you'll be able to see the connection between this step and when we get to our final process, that lifetime skill. So adding across, 1,200 plus 60 is 1,260. And that's 168. And we'll add those two together. $1,428. All right, so let's take a half step before we get to the standard algorithm, that regular way, and you'll be able to see the connection between all of these here. So the first half step, let's leave 42 together as a regular 42. We won't break it up by place value, but we will break up the 30 and the 4. And this is really the good one here to see the connection between this and that final destination of the traditional algorithm. So we have 42 times 30. And I like to think of that as 42 times 3. And then we just deal with that 0 later because we know it's really 30, not 3. 1,260. That looks familiar. 1,260. And then we'll have 42 times 4. 168. What do you know? Okay. So now we're going to add those two together and we would end up with 1,428 again. All right, so let's look at this through the standard algorithm and we'll be able to see the connection between why we did it this way or why kids did it this way in earlier years, leading us to that standard algorithm. So we have 42 times 34. So the way that I go through this here is going to be really to help you parents out there. And I'm going to use a lot of the language, that traditional language, so you can see the connection between the two. So we would think of, okay, 42 times 34. The first thing we're going to do is multiply 42 times 4. Yes, we are. We've already done that over here when we broke this number up here. So let's look at it as, and I sometimes like to think of this as, first we think of 42 times 4. That's kind of our first thought. You don't necessarily need to write it out separately, but that's what you're thinking. 4 times 2, 8. 4 times 4, 16. 168. Okay. The second thing you're going to think of is thinking 42 times 30. And I like offsetting it for a little bit here because it's easier to multiply by 3 and then later on look at it and say, well, that 3 wasn't a 3. That 3 represented 30 or 3 tenths. And then deal with that 0 by just dropping it. And that's why we put the 0 here first, because it's easier to keep organized by putting the 0 in first and say, okay, now I can multiply everything by 3. Even though we know it's technically a 30, we're going to multiply it by 3. 3 times 2, 6. 3 times 4, 12. And now we can add those together. 1,428. Same thing we got with everything else. And again, this is the skill that we're looking at by the end of 5th grade, is that students are here understanding how to do this skill here. This is all just a process of seeing how the numbers connect to each other to get to that lifetime skill. All right, let's try one more. Let's use some decimals here. Actually, let's not. Let's look at some with just larger numbers. So let's jump right into thinking about this. We won't draw the area model out here. If students need to do that, it's okay, but we need to make sure that they can do this as well. So if they need to see that stepping stone to get to this, it's okay. It's just a stepping stone. It's temporary. The goal is that they can achieve doing this by the end of the year. So I think of this as 436. First, we're going to multiply it by 2, and then we're going to do 436 times 40. And essentially doing this little mini step here is like doing the area model. It's just nice to see it that way sometimes. It helps to see it broken up. So we'll do 436 times 2 first. It's 12. And now we're going to do 436 times 40, but we're going to just multiply it by 4 because that's easier to organize. So we'll add the 0 over here, knowing, and that's helping us represent that we're really multiplying it by 40 each time. 4 times 6, 12, 14. $18,322. So the next video will be on multiplying when we have decimals, and we'll jump into the standard algorithm with that and talking about how the decimals will be represented in our answer.